Alright, settle in, get cozy, and let your mind drift north. Far north, where the sea breathes slowly against cold stone shores, and the night stretches long and silver under a sky brushed with quiet stars. The village slept in a way that would seem strange to us. Not all at once. Not deeply. Not in the silent, sealed-off way of modern rooms. Here, in the age of the Vikings, sleep came like the tide, in gentle waves, rolling in and out of people's lives through the dark. The longhouse stood low against the wind, its wooden beams dark with smoke and time. Turf covered the roof, soft with moss, so that from a distance the home looked like a part of the earth itself, as if it had grown there instead of being built. Inside, the air was warm and heavy with the scent of wool, ash, and the faint salt of dried fish. A single fire glowed at the center, no longer blazing, just a bed of red coals that pulsed softly like a sleeping heart. Around the walls, on raised wooden platforms covered with furs, the villagers lay wrapped together in layers of warmth. Families did not sleep apart. Privacy was not part of night. Sleep was shared, breath, dreams, and body heat woven together like threads in the same cloth. Little Eirik stirred first. Not because of noise, the longhouse was never truly quiet. Wood creaked. Someone snored. A sheep outside shifted its hooves. Wind whispered through the smoke hole above. These sounds were part of sleep, not interruptions to it. He woke because his body simply had enough. Viking sleep did not come in one long, unbroken stretch. They followed a pattern older than clocks, what we might call first sleep and second sleep. The night was a journey with a resting place in the middle. Eirik blinked into the firelight gloom. Beside him, his grandmother breathed slowly, her hand still curled in the wool of her blanket. Across the room, someone coughed softly. No one rushed back into deep dreams. This waking time was expected, natural. He slipped out from the furs, bare feet finding the smooth, worn wood of the platform. The floor below was cool earth. He padded toward the fire, careful not to step on the dog stretched like a rug near the warmth. Others were already awake. Old Sigran sat cross-legged, feeding a thin stick into the coals, coaxing a small flame to life. She did this every night between sleeps. Not to make the house bright, just enough light to keep the darkness friendly, instead of endless. Couldn't stay under the dreams, she murmured, voice soft and amused. Eirik shook his head, rubbing his eyes. This was the quiet hour. The in-between time, not day, not deep night. A space Vikings believed was thin, where thoughts moved differently, and the world of spirits drifted closer, not in a frightening way, but in a hushed, listening way. Some used this waking time to pray softly to the old gods. Some spoke of dreams, believing they carried messages. Others simply sat, mending nets, carving wood, or staring into the coals, letting the mind wander like a boat untethered. Across the longhouse, a man rose and stepped outside. This too was part of Viking sleep habits, the night air. Even in the cold, people often stepped out during the middle waking. The air was sharp and clean, and they believed it cleared heavy dreams from the head. Outside, the sky was a deep blue-black bowl, stars scattered like frost. The moon hung low, pale and watchful. Snow, fallen earlier, reflected faint light, so the world glowed softly instead of disappearing into darkness. The man breathed in deeply. Cold air filled his chest, stinging, waking him fully for a moment. He listened, to the distant sea, to the faint crack of ice shifting along the shore. Night was not an enemy to them. Long winters had taught the Vikings to live with darkness, not fight it. They did not flood it with light or push it away. Instead, they moved gently inside it, like creatures who understood its moods. Back inside, a mother nursed her baby without fully waking. Infants were rarely made to sleep alone. They lay close to warmth and heartbeat, learning the rhythm of life from the very beginning. Sleep came and went for them as it pleased, and no one expected otherwise. Near the doorway, two brothers whispered about a dream one had. "I saw a white horse walking on water," the younger said. The older nodded seriously. Dreams were not dismissed. "Maybe a journey," he murmured. "Or a warning to watch the ice." They did not laugh. Night thoughts carried weight. After a time, no one measured it, a stillness returned. The little flame died down, the waking hour faded like mist. One by one, people returned to their furs. Second sleep was often deeper, heavier. The mind, emptied of stray thoughts during the waking time, drifted farther now. Bodies relaxed fully. Breathing slowed into the shared rhythm of the room. Outside, snow began again, soft flakes falling without sound. Morning would not come quickly. In winter, daylight was a brief visitor. So the village leaned into rest. Work followed the sun, not the clock. If darkness lingered, so did sleep. And sometimes on the longest nights, they slept more than twice. Storm nights changed everything. When wind howled and shook the longhouse walls, no one expected peaceful rest. Sleep became a group effort. People told low stories until drowsiness returned. Children were pulled closer. The sound of voices soothed more than silence. They believed sleep was something you entered together, like stepping into a boat. Even where they slept was unusual to us. The platforms along the walls were not separate beds but shared spaces. Status might decide who slept nearer the warm center or the colder edges, but no one was ever entirely alone. Loneliness, to them, was more dangerous than discomfort. And their bedding, thick furs, stuffed with feathers or dried grass, held the smells of daily life: smoke, animals, sea air. These familiar scents were comforting, not unpleasant. They tied sleep to home, to survival, to belonging. As the years passed, Eric grew. He learned to row, to mend sails, to read weather in the shape of clouds. But he never lost the habit of the waking hour. Even as a man on long voyages, he would rise in the dark middle of the night aboard a gently rocking ship. While others slept, he would sit by the covered lantern, listening to waves slap the hull, feeling the world float beneath him. He believed, as his grandmother had, that this time between sleeps was when the soul stretched its legs. Not fully in the body, not fully in dreams, just drifting. Years later, when his hair had gone silver and his hands were thick with age, he would sit by another fire telling children how strange future people might be, the ones who tried to force sleep into one tight block, who shut out all sound, who feared waking in the night. They would think something is wrong, he'd say, smiling into the coals. The children would gasp. Wrong? They'd ask. Yes, he'd say, but night is not a straight road. It is a shoreline. You walk, you rest, you walk again. Outside, the northern lights would shimmer green across the sky, slow and silent like spirits dancing far above. Inside, breath would rise and fall. The fire would glow. Someone would turn in their furs. A baby would sigh. And sleep, in its old wandering way, would come and go like the sea against the patient land. Now let your own thoughts move like that. No straight lines. No need to hold the night tightly. Just drift, rest, drift again. The fire had fallen into its quietest form now. Not flame, not even ember. Just a low warmth hidden under ash, like a secret the house was keeping. Beyond the walls, the night deepened. Snow covered the world in a soft hush, and the village seemed to float in a pale dream. Even the sea, usually restless, moved slowly, as if it too were wrapped in furs. Inside, second sleep held most of the longhouse in its heavy embrace. But not everyone. There was always someone who lived closer to the edges of sleep. Tonight, it was Liv. She was not old, not young, somewhere in the middle years when dreams start to feel more like memories than stories. Her eyes opened without fear, without hurry. She lay still for a while, listening. A man snored near the far wall, a deep rumble like distant thunder. A child made a soft clicking sound with his tongue. The dog twitched in a dream, paws paddling through invisible fields. Liv slipped out from under her fur and moved toward the doorway, lifting the heavy wool curtain just enough to slide outside. Cold met her like a splash of clear water. The Vikings believed night air carried more than chill. It carried clarity, thoughts untangled, worries loosened. Stepping into the dark was like rinsing the mind. She stood barefoot on packed snow, not for long, just enough to feel the world directly. Above, the stars were fierce and bright. She searched for familiar patterns, the ones sailors trusted. Even on land, those stars were companions. Some nights, during this middle waking, people would lie outside for a few moments, wrapped in cloaks, gazing at the sky. They said it reminded the soul how large the world was, how small troubles could be. Liv exhaled, watching her breath turn to mist and vanish. In the distance, an owl called, low and hollow. Not an omen, not a warning. Just another night creature moving through its own rhythm. She returned inside, bringing a ribbon of cold air with her. No one complained. Night belonged to movement, as much as stillness. Near the hearth, a boy of perhaps 10 sat awake, knees pulled to his chest. "Bad dream?" Liv whispered. He nodded. This, too, was part of Viking nights. When dreams unsettled, they did not send children back alone into darkness. They sat, they talked, they reshaped the dream. "What happened?" "A wave. Taller than the house." Liv nodded thoughtfully, as if discussing weather. "Then you saw power. Maybe you will be strong at sea." The boy blinked. The fear softened. Dreams were not cages. They were messages to be turned, like stones in the hand, until they showed a smooth side. She added a small stick to the coals. A tiny flame rose, gold and steady. Light at night was used carefully. Too bright, and sleep fled. Too dark, and the mind wandered too far. The glow had to be like twilight, enough to be friendly, not enough to call morning. The Vikings' bodies followed seasons more than hours. In summer, sleep was light and scattered, taken in shorter stretches between long days of work under a sun that barely set. But in winter, they surrendered to rest. Long darkness invited longer dreams. Some historians would one day call this segmented sleep, but here it was simply life. The boy leaned against Liv's shoulder. She began humming, not a song with words, just a low, steady sound. Humming was common at night. The vibration soothed the chest, slowed breath, and signaled safety. Gradually, his weight grew heavier. Sleep took him again, gently this time. Across the longhouse, a man turned in his furs and muttered. His hand reached out, touching the arm of the person beside him. Even in sleep, people checked for presence. Contact meant warmth, and warmth meant survival. The dog lifted its head, ears twitching, then settled again with a sigh. Time drifted. Outside, clouds slid over the stars, dimming the sky. Snow stopped. The world waited. Then slowly, so slowly it almost wasn't noticeable, the darkness changed color. Not lighter, exactly. Just less deep. The far edge of night softened from black to charcoal. No one jumped up. Viking mornings in winter arrived quietly, and people met them slowly. They stretched in their furs, blinked, listened to their own breathing before rising. Sleep was not an enemy to shake off. It was something to leave politely. Liv returned to her place. She lay down, pulling wool to her chin. Her body, warmed by brief waking, slipped easily back into the last stretch of rest, a short, gentle sleep before day. This final sleep was often filled with simple dreams daily. Things, walking, talking, light. When the first person rose to stir the fire properly, the crackle sounded louder than any rooster. Flames climbed, smoke curled toward the roof vent, and the longhouse began its slow return to life. But even waking was unhurried. People believed the way you left sleep shaped your spirit for the day. No sudden shouts, no harsh orders. Just movement, stretching, quiet words. Children were often the last fully awake. They rolled in furs, halfway between worlds, while adults stepped outside to greet the pale morning. Eirik, now older, slower, paused at the doorway, looking back at the room. The furs were tangled. The air was smoky. The floor was hard earth. By modern standards, it would seem uncomfortable. But to him, it was the softest place in the world, because sleep here was never lonely, never forced, never treated like a problem to solve. It was a companion, a visitor who came and went as it wished, who was welcomed both times. He stepped into the gray dawn, breath rising like prayer. Behind him, the longhouse exhaled the blast of the night. And somewhere inside, someone turned in their blankets, drifting just a little longer on the gentle, ancient tide of sleep. Let your mind follow that slow rhythm. Nothing to chase, nowhere to hurry. Just the soft coming and going like waves on a quiet shore. In that part of the world, the morning never rushed. It unfolded like a blanket being slowly pulled back from the sky. Pale light rested on the snow, turning everything a serene silver blue. Smoke from the longhouse rose straight upward in the still air, a thin, perfect line connecting the earth to the clouds above. Inside, warmth gathered again around the growing fire, a welcome contrast to the crisp air outside. But even as the day began, sleep was not finished with the people. The Vikings didn't believe that night was the only time for rest. On these dark, deep winter days, when the sun hovered low and the body still felt heavy with slumber, short sleeps were common. People would drift off by the fire, sitting upright, tools still resting in their hands. These small drifts weren't seen as laziness. No, they were understood as the body's natural way of keeping balance with the season, a gentle surrender to the rhythm of winter. Old Sigrun, who had tended the coals through the long night, now sat carving a piece of driftwood she'd found. Her knife moved slowly, rhythmically, shaping the wood with practiced ease. After a time, her hands stilled, the blade resting softly in her palm. Her chin dipped to her chest, and she slept. No one thought to wake her. Her rest was respected, a silent part of the morning's flow. Around her, life continued softly. Wool was being carded, a pot was set near the flame to warm, and quiet talk about the weather drifted through the air. In this world, sleep moved among them like a cat, settling wherever and whenever it pleased, finding a comfortable space without causing a stir. Eirik stepped back inside, bringing a gust of clean, cold morning air with him. He saw Sigrun sleeping, and a small smile touched his lips. In their way of living, the borders between sleeping and waking were gentle, almost blurred. One could cross back and forth, without any alarm or sense of interruption. It was simply part of being. Children learned this intuitive rhythm early on. A little girl lay on her stomach near the hearth, drawing shapes in the soft ash with a stick. Her eyelids drooped. She blinked slowly, once, twice, then simply rested her cheek on her arm and slipped into a peaceful sleep right in the middle of a thought. Her mother, without breaking her own conversation, gently draped a small fur over the child's shoulders. No one said, "Go to bed." There was no bed to go to in that moment. Sleep simply came where it found you, and it was welcomed. Another habit that might seem strange to us was sleeping so close to the fire smoke. Modern minds might worry about the air quality, but their design was clever. The smoke hole in the roof and the constant, slow airflow kept the air moving, preventing it from becoming thick. And the faint, woody scent of the smoke itself had a purpose. In warmer months, it kept insects away. But in the deep of winter, its smell meant safety. Fire was life. To smell its smoke was to know that warmth would not vanish in the night, that the heart of the home was still beating. As the brief day wore on, work took people outdoors. They checked fishing nets set under holes in the ice. They packed more snow against the longhouse walls for extra insulation. Wood was split, the sharp crack of the axe echoing in the quiet landscape. But as the weak sun slipped behind the clouds and the pale blue of the afternoon deepened toward an early dusk, their bodies began to slow once more. The rhythm of the day was like a long, deep breath in, and a long, slow breath out. Inside, before true night even fell, someone began to tell a story. Stories were an essential part of sleep preparation. They helped ease the mind from the practicalities of task thinking into the fluid world of dream thinking. A man's voice, low and steady, almost musical, spoke of a seal that transformed into a woman under the silvery light of the moon. Children leaned against adults, their small bodies growing heavy. Hands kept working, braiding rope, mending clothing, but the movements grew slower, softer, more automatic. By the time darkness returned fully to the land, many were already halfway to their dreams, lulled by the cadence of the tale. They ate the evening meal together, a thick, hearty stew, fresh bread, and dried fish. The warmth from the food and the flickering firelight worked in tandem, guiding everyone toward the first sleep of the night. Full stomachs and the cozy atmosphere settled a comfortable heaviness in their limbs. Furs were shaken out and places along the sleeping platforms were claimed, though not rigidly. Sometimes people would change spots during the night, moving closer to the fire for warmth or shifting to be near family or a friend. To them, sleep was a social, communal experience, not a solitary one. Outside, the wind finally picked up, brushing snow along the frozen ground in faint, whispering lines. Inside, Eirik lay on his side, facing the room. He watched the shapes around him dim as the fire was banked for the night, its flames lowering to a gentle glow. He listened to the quiet symphony of breathing patterns, a kind of music he had known his entire life, the sound of his people at rest. He did not close his eyes right away. Vikings often lingered at the edge of sleep, allowing their thoughts to drift without grabbing onto them. They didn't try to fall asleep. Instead, they simply allowed sleep to arrive when it was ready, a welcome visitor, not something to be forced. His last waking sight was the gentle glow of the embers, red as distant stars in a dark sky. And then, first sleep took the longhouse. It was deep, heavy, thick with dreams. Time passed unmeasured in this profound rest. Then, just as it had the night before, and the night before that, and for countless nights before that, Bodies began to rise gently toward the surface of waking, a soft cough, a shift of a woolen blanket, eyes opening into a darkness that felt familiar and safe, not alarming. The middle waking had returned. But tonight was different. A soft, ethereal glow moved across the smoke hole above, rippling with silent energy. Someone noticed it first and whispered the word, "Lights." One by one, people quietly rose, wrapping their cloaks around their shoulders and stepping out into the biting cold. The northern lights flowed across the sky like slow, majestic rivers of color. Shimmering curtains of green, pale white, and just a hint of violet danced above them. They moved without a sound, vast, graceful, and utterly breathtaking. No one spoke loudly. Nights like this called for quiet awe, a shared moment of wonder. Some believed the lights were the spirits of ancestors traveling across the sky. Others thought they were reflections from distant, glittering worlds. No one claimed to know for sure. The mystery was part of the magic. This, too, was part of their sleep habits, honoring the wonders of the night when they appeared, even if it meant delaying the return to second sleep. They understood that a mind calmed by such profound beauty would rest even more deeply afterward. Children leaned against their parents, their breath turning to steam in the cold air. The snow on the ground glowed faintly, bathed in the shifting celestial light. After a time, the deep cold nudged them back indoors. They returned to their warm places, carrying the memory of the light behind their closed eyes. It was said that dreams after such a night were especially clear and gentle. Eirik settled into his furs again. His body felt heavy and ready for rest, but his mind felt wide and open, expanded by the spectacle he had just witnessed. Second sleep took him like calm water, pulling him gently back into its depths. Around him, the longhouse breathed as one single creature, with dozens of hearts beating in a single peaceful rhythm. Outside, the sky slowly dimmed, returning to its ordinary stardusted darkness. And the ancient pattern continued, waking, resting, drifting, a cycle never broken, never forced, but simply flowing. Flowing the way humans once did, guided by firelight, by the stars, and by the quiet. Deep understanding that the night was not something to be conquered or overcome, but something to move within softly. Let your own thoughts do the same now. Let them drift without sharp edges, without pressure. Just a gentle floating, like the light across a northern sky. Thank you for listening. Spring did come, though in the north it never arrived all at once. It began as a feeling before it became a sight. One morning, the air outside the longhouse did not bite quite as sharply. Snow still lay deep, but its surface had softened, rounded at the edges. Drips formed along the roofline, slow and patient. Inside, the people still slept in their old rhythm, but something subtle shifted. The night no longer felt endless. First sleep came later now. Evening light lingered, stretching thin and gold across the snow before fading. Work lasted longer, repairing boats, checking tools, preparing for the thaw, and bodies carried a different tiredness, one earned under light rather than darkness. Yet when they lay down in their furs, the ancient pattern held. Eirik noticed it first, how second sleep grew lighter in spring. Dreams thinned, became shorter, like mist instead of deep water. The body sensed change long before the mind named it. During the middle waking, more people stepped outside now. The sky, clearer between storms, revealed stars that had been hidden by winter clouds. The moon rode higher. Sometimes they could even hear water moving under ice, a distant, hollow rushing sound. That sound changed their dreams. Water meant travel, trade, fishing, journeys soon to come. Sleep became threaded with anticipation. One night, during the waking hour, Astrid sat beside Sigrun at the hearth. "Will sleep feel different at sea?" she asked quietly. Sigrun smiled, the firelight tracing every line on her face. "Yes," she said. "But it will still come in waves." She explained how sailors slept in short turns, wrapped in cloaks on deck, rocked by the ship's motion. How the sea itself created a rhythm, lifting and lowering the body until dreams blended with the sound of water. "Land sleep is like earth," Sigrun murmured. "Sea sleep is like breath," Astrid liked that. Nearby, Thorvald dozed sitting up back against a beam. His head nodded forward, then jerked slightly, then settled again. No one teased him. Spring work was heavy, and small sleeps wherever they happened were part of strength, not weakness. The Vikings never tried to gather all rest into one place. They scattered it like seeds. As days lengthened, another change came. Dawn began to arrive earlier, sometimes catching people still in second sleep. Light slipped across faces, warm and golden instead of blue-gray. Birds returned, their early calls threading into dreams. Some mornings people woke not from rest but from light itself. And yet, even with the growing day, they kept the middle waking when night allowed it. That quiet hour had become more than habit. It was reflection time, dream-sharing time, a pause between worlds. Eirik treasured it more as he aged. One mild night, he woke and found the longhouse unusually still. No one else stirred. The fire had gone nearly dark. He rose and stepped outside alone. Snow had melted in patches, revealing dark earth beneath. The sky shimmered with faint stars, but along the horizon lay the first hint of dawn. He stood there, wrapped in his cloak, and listened. Drip, drip, distant water moving. He realized something simple. Their way of sleeping had taught them to listen, to bodies, to seasons, to night itself. They did not force silence, so they learned which sounds mattered and which could be folded into dreams. He breathed in, slow and deep. Inside, someone turned over. A child murmured. The dog gave a soft huff. Life, even in sleep, was never still. When he returned to his furs, second sleep came only briefly, like a short visit. Morning followed quickly after. Soon, summer would stretch nights thin as thread. Sleep would scatter into naps in grass, dozing in boats, resting in shade. But the core would remain, the trust that rest comes when allowed, not commanded. And so, as the seasons turned and years passed, the village kept its old understanding. Sleep was not something to capture. It was something to welcome, again and again, like a tide that never truly leaves, only ebbs and returns. Let yourself follow that tide now, no need to hold on to the shore. Just the gentle rise and fall, and quiet drifting under a wide northern sky. Have you ever wondered how people slept before electricity, before our rigid 8-hour schedules? Let's travel back in time to a Viking longhouse buried in the deep quiet of a Scandinavian winter. As winter deepened, snow climbed high along the longhouse walls, pressing close like a white blanket over the land. The world outside grew softer, as if wrapped in wool. Inside, the air was thick and warm, smelling of pine smoke, leather, and dried apples. People here didn't fight the darkness. They listened to it. They went to their furs early, not out of exhaustion, but because the darkness invited stillness. Bodies followed the light, the way plants do. Before sleep, there was always a slowing. A mother might brush her daughter's hair with her fingers. A man would check the door latch twice, a small ritual to ease the mind. These tiny acts were part of sleep too, a gentle closing of the day. First sleep came quickly, falling like thick snow. Dreams stirred of summer seas, green hills, and ancestors who lived on in stories and dreams. But then, in the middle of the night, a natural waking would occur. It wasn't a problem to be solved. It was just part of the rhythm. Tonight, a soft sound fills the house. Snow sliding from the roof, a long, slow hush. Several people open their eyes at once. They listen, not with fear, but with awareness. Thorvald sits up, pulls on his cloak, and steps outside to check the roof, making sure the snow falls clear. Others follow, their breath clouding in the sharp starlit air. This was another Viking habit, calm night work. Darkness wasn't forbidden's territory. If something needed tending, they moved through the night as naturally as through the day. Back inside, warmed by the brief motion, they don't rush back to sleep. Instead, someone begins a low, rhythmic chant. Others join in softly, their voices blending until the longhouse seems to hum. Sound was a bridge back to rest. Gradually, the voices fade. Second sleep returns, deeper this time. Hours later, just before dawn, a faint blue light edges the smoke hole. This is the dream-heavy hour. Eirik dreams he's rowing across a sea of glass, each stroke making no ripple. Dreams in this final stretch often carried a sense of peace, the mind wandering freely. Then, morning arrives, not with noise, but with light. It creeps over the snow, slips through the smoke hole, and gently touches closed eyelids. One by one, people rise. They didn't battle wakefulness or chase perfect sleep. They allowed the night to move through them in phases, like seasons in a year. This was the gift of their rest, a quiet steadiness that they carried into the day. Through snow and sun, storm and stillness, the Vikings continued their ancient dance with the dark. Because to them, night wasn't an emptiness to be conquered. It was a place to breathe between days. And maybe you can breathe there too. Slowly, gently, letting your thoughts come and go, like distant waves under a quiet northern sky. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this journey into the past, consider subscribing for more stories. Sleep well. Summer, when it finally settled over the north, changed the shape of night completely. Darkness no longer fell like a curtain. It thinned, it faded, it lingered at the edges of the sky but never quite took over. The sun dipped low, brushed the horizon, and rose again as if it had only paused to rest. And so the people's sleep scattered like light on water. The longhouse still stood, still warm with smoke and wood and the familiar weight of years, but many nights were no longer spent entirely inside it. Bodies followed the weather. When the air turned soft and the ground dried, people rested outdoors, wrapped in cloaks, beneath boats turned on their sides or beside stone walls warmed by the day's sun. Sleep in summer was lighter, shorter, drifting. Eirik liked to lie on his back outside, hands folded on his chest, watching the sky refuse to darken. His eyes would close, open, close again. He might sleep an hour, wake, watch the clouds glow pink, then drift once more. No one insisted on bedtime. Work flowed with the light and rest slipped in wherever it could. A nap beside nets drying in the breeze, a doze in the tall grass while sheep grazed nearby, a moment's sleep sitting against a sun-warmed rock. Children were masters of this. They could drop into sleep mid-play, curled up like cats, and wake bright and running just minutes later. Yet even in summer, the old habit of the middle waking sometimes remained. Not from deep darkness, but from an inner rhythm. A person might wake while others slept under the pale sky and feel that same quiet space open inside, that place between thoughts. One such night, Astrid lay near the shore, wrapped in wool, listening to the waves breathe against the pebbles. She woke not to a sound, but to a stillness. The sea had gone completely calm. She opened her eyes. The sky was pearl gray, the clouds as thin as breath. Around her, others slept in scattered shapes, their cloaks rising and falling. She sat up, hugging her knees. Even without true night, this moment felt like the old middle waking, that thin place where the world felt wide and thoughts moved slowly. She watched a seabird glide low over the water, its wings barely moving. Behind her, Thorvald snored softly, one arm over his face. Eirik lay still as driftwood, but she knew he was awake. His breathing had that listening quality. "Couldn't stay in dreams?" he asked without opening his eyes. She smiled. "The sea is too quiet." He nodded. Good time to think then. They did not talk more. Words were not required in that hour. Sleep for them was not just rest. It was a conversation with the world, sometimes silence, sometimes full of images, sometimes simply a shared stillness under the sky. As summer wore on, exhaustion sometimes arrived suddenly after long days at sea. Then sleep came heavy and deep, taken wherever the body dropped on deck, in the grass, by the hearth, even in daylight. No guilt, no struggle. They trusted the body's call. And always, when autumn shadows began to stretch longer again, the old winter pattern slowly returned. Nights thickened. The first sleep grew deep. The middle waking returned with its fire glow and whispered dream talk. Years passed this way. Astrid grew tall. Eirik grew slower. Sigrun's hands, once steady with carving, now rested more often in her lap as she dozed by the hearth in soft, frequent sleeps. Through every season, one thing stayed unchanged. Sleep was part of life, not apart from it. It mixed with story, with work, with love, with grief. People fell asleep mid-laughter, woke to babies crying, drifted into dreams beside the dying and the newborn alike. There was no sharp border saying, "Here is waking, there is sleep," just a gentle shoreline where the two touched. One winter evening, many years later, Astrid, now grown, her own child wrapped beside her, watched the fire sink low. The longhouse hummed with the sound of breath. She felt her daughter's tiny fingers curl into her tunic. She rested her hand there, just as her father once had done for her. Outside, snow fell without a sound. She did not try to sleep. She simply waited for sleep to come, the way her people always had, like a tide returning to shore. And you can wait like that too. No chasing, no holding, just letting rest find you, the way it always has, the way it always will. Gently, like waves under a quiet northern sky. The fire had fallen low again, its glow a soft pulse in the heart of the longhouse. Outside, snow moved sideways in the wind, but inside everything was held, warmth, breath, the steady sense of people gathered against the cold. Astrid did not remember the moment sleep took her. It came the old way, while listening to the wind brush the walls, to the tiny whistle in the smoke hole, to her daughter's small, damp breaths against her arm. Sleep did not fall like a curtain. It rose like mist. Her dreams that night were simple. She walked through the longhouse, but it was larger, stretching farther than it could in waking life. Every person she had ever known rested along the walls. Some old, some young, some long gone from the world. All breathing, all warm. In the dream, she did not find this strange. Because in her people's understanding, sleep was where times touched. The past was not sealed away. It drifted close in dreams, sat beside the fire, lay down in familiar places. Near dawn, her daughter stirred. A small sound, not crying, just the soft noise of returning from a dream. Astrid's eyes opened at once, though she felt deeply rested. This too was an old habit. Mothers slept lightly, like birds on a branch, never fully lost to the world. She shifted, tucking the fur more securely around the child, and closed her eyes again. This last stretch of sleep was the gentlest of all. Thin, bright dreams, thoughts like feathers. Outside, winter began to loosen its grip. Not visibly yet. Snow still lay deep, but under it water moved, roots waited. The earth breathed slowly beneath its white covering. People felt it in their sleep before they saw it in the world. They dreamed of walking, of rowing, of long paths under open sky. When morning came, it arrived with a different light, faintly warmer, faintly wider. The longhouse woke in its slow, ancient way. No sudden noise, just the murmur of life rising again. Thorvald coughed and stretched, joints cracking like small sticks. Sigrun blinked awake and sat still for a long moment, letting the world come into focus. A boy rolled out of his blankets and thudded softly to the floor, still half in dreams. Astrid remained lying down a little longer. She watched the smoke curl upward. She listened to her daughter breathing. She felt the soft ache of sleep still in her limbs. Not unpleasant, just a reminder that rest had done its work. She thought of how many nights had passed like this. How many more might come? In her lifetime, she had slept in storms, under summer skies, in boats that rocked like cradles, beside sickbeds, beside new life, beside silence and beside laughter. And always, sleep had come not as something to control, but something to meet. That was the quiet wisdom her people carried. Night is not empty. Darkness is not absence. Sleep is not escape. It is a returning to breath, to warmth, to the slow rhythm that lives under thought. She closed her eyes one more time, just for a moment, while morning sounds gathered. And there, in that small space between waking and rising, she rested in the oldest place of all, the place where the mind drifts, the body is held, and time moves like water beneath ice, steady, patient, unafraid. Perhaps tonight you can let yourself rest there too, where nothing needs solving, where thoughts can float past like snow in quiet air, and sleep, in its own time, finds you again. Thanks for listening. We hope this brought you a moment of peace. If it did, please consider liking and subscribing for more quiet reflections. Sleep well. Years softened into one another the way nights softened into mornings. The longhouse changed slowly, beams replaced, roof patched, new hands taking over old tasks, but the rhythm of sleep remained like a quiet song no one forgot. Astrid's daughter grew the way children do in places ruled by season and sky. Sturdy, wind-cheeked, sure-footed on snow and stone. She learned early how to wrap herself in a cloak, how to curl close to warmth, how to drift into sleep beside a fire or under open air without fear. One winter night, long after Sigrun's carving knife had gone still forever, and her place by the hearth had passed to others, the girl, Freya, woke in the middle of the dark. She did not cry out. She simply opened her eyes and listened, just as generations before her had done. The longhouse was full of sleeping shapes. The fire breathed low. Wind moved along the walls like a slow hand. She felt that familiar in-between feeling. Not fully awake, not dreaming either. A floating place. Carefully, she slipped from her blankets and padded across the floor to where Astrid sat already awake, staring into embers. "You too?" Astrid whispered. Freya nodded, climbing into her mother's lap. They sat like that for a long time, saying nothing. Words were not needed in the middle waking. Presence was enough. Freya watched the coals shift, tiny collapses sending brief sparks upward. She felt her mother's breathing, slow and steady. "Why do we wake at night?" she finally murmured. Astrid smiled softly. "Because we are not meant to travel the dark all at once." Freya thought about this. Astrid brushed hair from her daughter's face. "Night is wide. We walk a little, rest a little, then walk again." Freya leaned her head against Astrid's chest. The answer felt true even if she did not fully understand it yet. Around them, sleep continued to move through the room. Someone turned. Someone sighed. The dog thumped its tail once against the floor in a dream. Freya's eyelids drooped. Astrid did not send her back to her bedding. She simply held her, letting second sleep find them both there by the hearth, wrapped in the gentle heat of the last coals. Outside, stars wheeled slowly above the roof. Snow reflected faint light. The world turned, patient and enormous. Inside, 2 generations drifted back into dreams. And so the old pattern carried forward, not written, not taught in lessons, but learned through breath and firelight, through winter and summer, through the simple trust that rest comes in waves and humans are meant to rise and fall with it. Long after names were forgotten, after the longhouse had sunk back into earth, and grass, after new peoples built new homes under the same northern sky, the rhythm remained hidden in human bodies. The urge to wake in the night and stare into darkness. The comfort of a quiet hour when the world feels paused. The way thoughts soften when not forced away. These were echoes of that older time when sleep was not a battle to win, but a sea to float upon. So drift now the way they did, without edges, without hurry. Letting the night hold you the way earth holds roots beneath the snow. Steady, quiet, and kind. The coals sank into their final glow, and for a while the longhouse seemed to breathe in perfect unison, a slow rise of many chests, a slow fall, like the sea on a windless day. Freya dreamed. She dreamed she was walking along a shoreline that never ended. The sky above was not dark, not light, just soft, like the inside of a shell. Footprints appeared beside hers, though she saw no one. She did not feel alone. In the old understanding, dreams like this were not strange. They were journeys of the mind when the body rested safely among others. Sleep was never a solitary crossing. It was a harbor. Near dawn, Astrid stirred first. A change in the air had touched her, the faintest hint of thaw. A smell beneath the smoke and wool, damp and earthy. Snow melting somewhere far off. She did not open her eyes right away. She let herself hover in that last delicate place between dreaming and waking, where thoughts are slow and feelings clear. This, she believed, was the deepest rest of all, not the heavy sleep of the night's center, but this floating return when the mind had not yet taken up the weight of the day. Freya shifted in her arms. Astrid opened her eyes. The smoke hole above was pale gray now. Morning gathered quietly, like breath on cold air. Around them, others began their gentle rising. A cough, a stretch, the rustle of furs. No one spoke loudly. Morning voices were soft, as if speech itself was waking. Freya blinked, looking up at her mother. "I dreamed of walking," she murmured. Astrid nodded. "Good dreams walk," she said. "They stretch the spirit." Freya accepted this easily. Children in that world did not separate dream from meaning. Both belonged to life. They rose together and stepped outside. The sky held a thin line of gold at the horizon. Snow glittered faintly. The world felt new, even though it had been here all along. Others joined them, wrapped in cloaks, breath rising like smoke. They stood quietly, watching the light grow. No one hurried to tasks yet. There was a belief, never written, only lived, that the first moments of morning shaped the heart. So they gave that time to stillness, to noticing, to simply being present in the turning of dark into day. Eirik, now bent and slow, came to stand beside them. His eyes, though ringed with age, were calm. "Good sleep?" he asked. Astrid smiled. "Enough." That was always the answer. Not perfect, not complete. Just enough. Because sleep was not something to finish. It was something to return to, again and again, through a lifetime. Behind them, the longhouse waited, warm and dim. Ahead, the day slowly opened, pale and wide. Freya squeezed her mother's hand, then let go and ran a few steps into the snow, laughing at nothing, full of morning. Astrid watched her, feeling the quiet strength that came from a night lived in rhythm, drifting, waking, drifting again. And above them all, the sky brightened, vast and patient. as it had for generations who slept beneath it in the old, wandering way. Rest can be like that too, not forced, not chased. Just returning in gentle waves, carrying you in and out, the way the sea carries the shore, slow, steady, and kind. The day unfolded slowly, like honey dripping from a comb. Inside the longhouse, the fire was rebuilt from the last embers, glowing steady and warm. The villagers moved through their morning work with soft steps, careful not to disturb the lingering calm that night had left behind. Even the animals seemed to feel it. The sheep shifted quietly, the dog yawned and stretched in long, lazy motions. Eirik sat on a low bench near the fire, hands folded over his knees, watching the rhythms of the house. Age had slowed him, but it had not dimmed the sharp awareness of time and season. He could feel the echoes of sleep in the air, the subtle pull of the next rest that would come that night, the gentle memory of dreams already half forgotten. Freya ran in and out of the spaces between work, bringing small bundles of firewood, laughing at her own shadow on the walls. Sleep had taught her a subtle patience. She could rest mid-motion and rise with energy, knowing that night would return, that rest was not something finite. Astrid moved through them all, quietly observing, quietly listening. She had learned long ago that the middle waking, that strange hour between sleeps, could arrive at any time, not only in the deep night. Sometimes it came at dusk, sometimes during quiet mornings. Sometimes when one had grown used to the rhythm of life and no longer expected it to follow strict rules. It was always gentle, always waiting, always exactly when it was meant to be. By midday, work slowed under the long sun. Even in summer, when daylight stretched across the northern sky like a golden river, the villagers understood the value of pause. A quick nap in the grass, a doze under a boat, or even a few moments resting against the hearth were part of the living pattern of sleep, never shameful, never hurried, always respected. Eirik's mind wandered as he watched them. Sleep, he realized, was like the northern seasons, changing shape, never the same, but always returning. Winter taught depth. Spring taught light. Summer taught flexibility. Autumn taught preparation. And through it all, the same invisible thread connected them. The understanding that rest was not simply a pause from life, but a living part of it. Evening arrived slowly. The pale sky softened into muted shades of pink and gray. Shadows lengthened across the snow, and the village instinctively prepared for the first sleep of the night. Furs were shaken out, blankets readied, and the fire was coaxed into a steady glow. Children, weary from days spent running and learning, curled into nests of wool. Adults settled along the platforms, some already half asleep, listening to the soft murmurs of others in their shared warmth. The dog shifted and rested its head on a human knee. All around, life slowed. The middle waking came again, as expected. Some arose quietly, stepping outside into the gentle night air. Others stayed by the fire, listening, observing, letting thoughts drift without clutching them. It was a sacred hour, unspoken but known, a pause that allowed the mind to wander, the heart to rest, and the spirit to stretch. Astrid and Freya sat near the hearth, hands intertwined, breathing in rhythm with the slow pulse of the longhouse. Outside, the sky deepened into indigo. Stars began to peek through, faint at first, then clearer as darkness settled. The northern sky seemed to reach down toward them, as if inviting them to dream again, to rest again, to move in harmony with night. Sleep returned gently, like waves folding over the shore. Dreams drifted in soft currents, sometimes vivid, sometimes faint, always winding around the living memory of the people. And in the quiet, the villagers moved with them, floating, drifting, awake, and asleep at once, part of the eternal rhythm that had carried their ancestors, and would carry their children for generations to come. Eirik watched them, heart full, knowing the wisdom of centuries. Sleep was not a demand, a schedule, or a puzzle. Sleep was life itself, fluid, patient, and endlessly returning. And outside, under the northern sky, the world breathed softly, waiting for the next tide of dreams. Let your mind float there too, in the gentle rise and fall, the quiet rhythm, the soft pulse of night, letting sleep carry you exactly where it needs to, just as it always has. Night folded itself once more around the longhouse, but it did not feel like an ending. It felt like a return. Inside, the fire gave off a low amber glow, just enough to paint the beams in soft gold and leave the corners in friendly shadow. The air hummed with that deep quiet that only comes when many people sleep in the same space, a layered silence, alive with breath. Freya dreamed again. This time she dreamed of sitting beside the sea with her grandmother Sigrun, though she barely remembered her in waking life. In the dream, Sigrun did not speak. She only smiled and handed Freya a smooth stone warm from the sun. Freya held it tightly. In the longhouse, her fingers curled around nothing. Astrid, half awake in the middle hour, noticed and gently covered Freya's hand with her own. She did not ask about the dream. Morning would come for that. Night was for holding, not explaining. The middle waking passed softly. A few villagers stepped outside to look at the sky. Clouds moved slowly, revealing stars that blinked like watchful eyes. The air smelled different now, less of deep frost, more of distant water and earth. Spring was coming closer. Inside again, people settled into second sleep. This sleep was the quietest of all, not heavy like the first, not thoughtful like the waking hour, but deep and smooth, like drifting under calm water. In that sleep, worries loosened, muscles softened. Even the lines in old faces eased. Eirik, resting near the wall, felt himself drift into a memory dream. He was young again, rowing at dawn, mist lifting from the sea. The oars dipped in perfect rhythm, no pain in his shoulders, no stiffness in his hands. He did not know it was a dream, and he did not need to. Dreams were not lies to him. They were places the spirit stretched its legs. The longhouse held all of it, the dreams of children, the memories of elders, the quiet breaths of those too young to remember or too old to rise quickly. One roof, one fire, one night shared. Outside, the sky slowly changed. Black softened to blue. Blue thinned to silver. A single bird, confused by the shifting season, called too early, its voice small but clear. Inside, bodies felt the change before eyes opened. Breathing shifted. Hands moved. Someone sighed long and deep, like the sea pulling back from shore. Astrid woke with a calm she could not name. Freya stirred beside her and opened her eyes, blinking at the dim light. "Morning?" she whispered. "Almost," Astrid said. They stayed lying down a little longer. That was another quiet habit, not rising the moment sleep loosened, but letting the mind arrive gently. Around them, others began their slow return to day. The dog stood, stretched long, and shook itself, tags of dried snow falling from its fur. Someone stirred the fire, and sparks rose like tiny stars. Light slipped through the smoke hole and spread across the room, touching faces, wool, wood. Night had not been defeated. It had simply flowed into morning. Freya sat up, hair wild, eyes bright with the last trace of dreams. She still felt the warmth of the smooth stone in her hand, though it was gone. She smiled anyway, because even when dreams faded, the feeling of them remained, like warmth left in blankets after someone rises. Eirik watched the light grow and felt the same quiet truth he had felt his whole life. Sleep leaves gifts behind. Softness, patience, a sense that the world is larger than one day's worries. The longhouse filled with gentle movement, morning voices low and kind. Outside, snow dripped from the eaves. Somewhere beneath it, water ran free. Another night had passed in the old way, not forced, not measured, just lived. And already, without anyone speaking of it, the next night waited beyond the turning of the sun, ready to welcome them back into its slow, breathing dark. So let yourself drift that way too. No sharp edges between night and day, just the steady rhythm, the quiet coming and going. Like breath, like waves, like sleep itself. The days turned, quiet and steady, like a wheel worn smooth from long use. Spring loosened the land. Snow shrank back into shadows, then into memory. Water ran in narrow silver threads between dark earth and waking grass. The air changed its voice, no longer the hush of deep winter, but the soft murmur of melt and movement. And still, through all this change, the rhythm of sleep held the village like an invisible net. One evening, after a day spent clearing driftwood from the shore, Astrid felt the old heaviness settle into her bones, the kind earned from long motion under open sky. She welcomed it. This kind of tiredness made first sleep come deep and sure. Inside the longhouse, the fire crackled brighter than usual, fed with fresh wood. Children spoke in low bursts of excitement, then faded into yawns. Adults' voices grew slower, sentences stretching out between breaths. Furs were laid out. Cloaks folded under heads. The familiar arrangement of bodies formed along the walls. Freya curled beside her mother, already half lost to dreams. Astrid watched the fire a little longer, letting her thoughts drift loose, not catching any one of them. That was how they entered sleep, not by pushing thoughts away, but by letting them float past like bits of wood on a river. First sleep took them. It came like a warm tide, lifting everyone at once. The longhouse quieted into the music of breath. Hours later, as always, the middle waking rose gently. Astrid opened her eyes into darkness lit only by coals. For a moment she lay still, feeling the weight of night, not heavy, just present. She slipped free of her blankets and moved toward the doorway. Outside, the sky was deep and clear. No snow now, only dark ground and the faint pale shimmer of early spring frost. Stars scattered wide overhead, she breathed in. Cold air, yes, but softer than winter's bite. It filled her lungs and cleared the last threads of dream. Behind her, she heard footsteps. Eirik joined her, moving slowly but steadily. "Water's louder tonight," he said. She listened. He was right. Somewhere beyond the village, unseen streams rushed with melt, a low, constant sound beneath the silence. "Spring sleep," he murmured. She nodded. They both knew what that meant. Dreams would turn toward travel, toward fields, toward boats and movement. The body sensed what was coming and began to prepare. They stood there without speaking more. This quiet sharing of the middle hour was part of their bond. Not conversation, but presence. Inside, Freya stirred, sensing absence. She woke, padded to the doorway, and slipped her hand into Astrid's. Together they watched the stars a little longer. Then, as naturally as breath turning to exhale, they went back inside. Second sleep welcomed them. This sleep was smooth and deep, carrying away the last of winter's stiffness. Bodies sank fully. Minds drifted far. Freya dreamed of running over green hills she had not yet seen that year. Astrid dreamed of sunlight on water. Eirik dreamed of wind filling a sail. Near dawn, the air inside the longhouse shifted again, that subtle lifting that came just before light. Birds called earlier now, their songs thin but eager. Eyes opened, hands stretched. Someone laughed softly at a dream they were already forgetting. Morning light slipped through the smoke hole, pale gold. Another night lived the old way had done its quiet work. The villagers rose slowly, carrying with them the softness of rest, the echo of dreams, the calm that comes from moving with night instead of against it. Outside the earth waited, damp and dark, ready for footsteps. Inside, the fire caught flame once more. And beyond it all, unseen but always returning, the next sleep already moved toward them like a distant tide. Let your mind follow that tide now. Gentle, unhurried, coming and going in its own time. Just as it always has. Rain begins to fall on the village of Hoffensvik, a gentle drumming against the thatched roofs. Inside her longhouse, Freya stirs from her first sleep. The fire has dwindled to glowing embers, casting long dancing shadows on the wooden walls. She listens to the rain, a familiar lullaby that has soothed generations of her kin. It speaks of the earth drinking its fill, of the fjord swelling, of life continuing its steady, quiet rhythm. She pulls a woolen blanket tighter around her shoulders, the scent of lanolin and wood smoke filling her senses. There's no need to rush back to sleep. The night is long, and this waking moment is a gift, a quiet space between dreams. A few doors down, young Astrid is awake too. She's not troubled, just listening. The rain on the roof is a story whispered by the sky. She imagines the drops tracing paths down the great mountains, joining streams that flow to the sea, where her father, Thorvald, will soon sail. She thinks of the sleeping world outside, the sheep huddled in their pens, the great oaks standing silent in the dark, their roots drinking deep. She feels a part of it all, a small, warm thread in the vast, damp tapestry of the night. It's a feeling of belonging, deep and unshakable. Thorvald himself is mending a net by the low light of a single tallow lamp. His hands, rough and calloused from years of hauling ropes and casting lines, move with a practiced grace. The gentle hiss of the rain is a welcome companion, a soft counterpoint to the creak of the house settling. He doesn't mind this quiet labor in the heart of the night. It's a time for reflection, for thinking of voyages past and those yet to come. The sea is a demanding master, but it is also generous. This peaceful interlude is part of the balance, a moment of calm before the demanding energy of the day. Even old Eirik, the storyteller, is awake on his straw mattress. His dreams were of ancient kings and forgotten battles, but the sound of the rain has brought him back to the here and now. He doesn't fight the wakefulness. Instead, he lets his mind drift, weaving new tales from the sound of the wind and the soft patter of water. Stories like the seasons have their own cycles. They are born in moments like this, in the quiet hush of a sleeping village, waiting for the right voice to give them life when the sun returns. As the first hint of gray light begins to soften the eastern sky, a new kind of quiet settles over Ravensvik. The rain has stopped, leaving the air fresh and clean. One by one, the villagers begin to drift back into a deeper sleep, their brief waking time complete. Freya sighs contentedly, her thoughts already turning to gentle dreams. Astrid curls up, a small smile on her face. Thorvald sets aside his net, his work done. And Eirik's mind finally goes quiet, the stories nestled safely away. The village sleeps on, united in the peaceful rhythm of the night, ready to greet the dawn, renewed and restored.